Greetings and welcome. Thing number one, Georgia, Auburn. We'll talk about kind of both those subjects in a roundabout way, at least in today's show. Can we do one thing before we begin, though? I did this on Dog Nation Daily for our video audience, and I want to do it here for Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger as well. You know, I've kind of got the old school kind of, at least styled sweater on. It's cold here in the Atlanta area where we live. But underneath that, and I don't do a lot of undressing on the show typically, but I do want to show this.
Calm down, ladies. Calm down.
Ladies,
He's
please.
taken. He's taken.
Just calm yourselves down. Try to control yourself. Old school here, throwing it back to December of 2017 with the Dog Nation Retaliation.
Oh, wow.
Not a lot of people have the Dog Nation Retaliation t-shirt, but this is, you see, 28-7 in honor of the win against Auburn in the SEC championship game. This was our way of mocking Auburn coach Gus Malzahn for his dog crap comment at the, obviously, the game those two teams played back in November of that year. Georgia got its revenge there on the SEC championship. We called it Dog Nation Retaliation. We did a whole bunch leading into that game. A great time. And I thought it would be appropriate, Jeff, just to put some positive vibes out there in the air of, hey, we're remembering Dog Nation Retaliation from December of 2017 as Georgia tries to get another win against Auburn on Saturday.
Fond memories.
Very fun.
Great time.
Quite
fun. Remember how rocking the Mercedes-Benz Stadium was that year when everybody came back and everybody was like, well, let's see what Georgia's got. And they kind of took it to Auburn right out of the box. So that was a really close game in the SEC championship game. Folks forget how tight that was in the fourth quarter. But to preface what you earlier said, ladies, you got Brandon. He's trying to audition for a future Georgia cheerleader homecoming role or whatever with that sweater. But one more thing, as we stated earlier, ladies, he is taken. He is off the market. So stay out of those DMs, man. Don't slide into those Brandon Adams.
Try to control yourself. Now, I don't ever wear a ring, but that doesn't mean that I'm not married and have been for a long time. So, ladies, please show some decorum. All right. With that said, we're going to do top targets in a minute. We'll kind of figure out where things stand with the guys still on the board for Georgia for the class of 2020. But, Jeff, you and I spoke about this on Dog Nation Daily when you appeared on Tuesday's program. That with Georgia playing Auburn on Saturday, once again, the recruiting efforts of Georgia are going to play a huge role in its likelihood of winning this game. This is true against every opponent. It may be especially true against Auburn, just given the fact that over the years these two have gone head-to-head with battles with each other and when it comes to recruiting. And the fact that Georgia has been stacking so many elite classes in recent years, I mean, that's one of the reasons why, maybe one of the very few reasons why Georgia's a point spread favorite in a tough spot like Jordan-Hare Stadium on Saturday. And I guess that's where we're going to begin our program today.
Yeah, I think what we're going to start this week is, you know, there's lots of things to get to with like Theo Johnson and some recent commitments, 2023, 2021 classes. But to me, Brandon, and we kind of got down in the forum on this a little bit, as I was watching Georgia, Missouri on over the weekend, for my freshman report column, I always write about the young guys getting in there. I noticed one thing. It jumped out to me how different defensively and how maybe nastier Georgia is defensively when they have Tyson Campbell in there. And it harkened back to my mind, who would have thought, like Brandon, if I would have told you after that much ballyhooed number one recruiting class in 2018 was signed, what if I would have told you out of that number one class overall, best class in Georgia history, that there were by the time Georgia played Auburn in 2019, there were only two starters on the Georgia team from that 2018 class, because that's the case. There are only two starters right now from the 2018 top 10 ranked guys on the Georgia team right now, especially heading into Auburn. And we've got a graphic on this, so look at that. Two full-time starters among the top 10 signees, but it kind of gets a little bit better. 3 of the top 10 signees are no longer with the program. Yeah. Everybody remembers those guys. Just 4 starters from the top 15 signees that year. You go Tyson Campbell, Trey Hill, Cade Mays, and Azeez Ojulari. And then you look at the whole class, and only 6 starters out of 25 signees, and that's counting one Jordan Davis, who was woefully underrated as a 3-star, and also the punter Jay Kermada. Now, the reason why I say this is kind of reinforces Georgia's total recruiting philosophy every year, which is they're going to sign a bunch of dudes, they're going to get them in the program, they're going to have them competing, they're going to have them working out, and then they're going to try and sign a better group every year.
Yeah.
And what Georgia's doing with this 2019 class, if we're looking under the guise of significant contributors, a case can be made that the 2019 class is contributing already to the bottom line of Georgia's success so far this year, just as much as the 2018 class, and maybe even just as much as the 2016 class. And we kind of broke it out, Brandon, to take a look at that. We have a couple other graphics to look at that. Look at the 2016 class. Now, these are all 20, 21-year-old grown men, and that's our second graphic where we look at the significant 19 contributors. And look at those, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely. You see a lot of interesting stuff.
You got Clark. I think he's playing as well as anybody in that class. Ben Cleveland, Solomon Kinley, Brian Harrion, Tyler Simmons, Charlie Warner. Look at 2017.
Yeah.
That's where maybe the meat and potatoes of this Georgia roster is.
Certainly proven to be that way.
Look at that. You've got Jake Fromm. You got LeCount. You got Herring playing well, Monty Rice, Swift, Stokes, Thomas, Webb, and Wilson.
So a couple things that reminded me about that. First of all, the funny thing about 2017 is we sort of knew that was special at the time, even though numerically the 2018, 2019 classes are measurably better, at least according to the way that the recruiting folks do their work. But something about that 2017 class always felt a little bit intangible, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Good point.
And so to see that, hey, this year, so many of the huge contributors for Georgia did come in that class of 2017, just based on the way we felt about it at the time, that kind of makes some sense.
Like if we had some Eddie Awards right now for the Oscar-style theme awards for right now in Kirby Smart's first four classes, if you had to pick the most valuable recruit out of Kirby Smart's time at Georgia so far, I think all the candidates come out of the 2017 class. Georgia absolutely had to have a bullseye with Jake Fromm, and that's what he was. The same thing goes with DeAndre Swift, Eric Stokes, Andrew Thomas, Isaiah Wilson. Those guys came in expecting to play and carry a lot of water for the Bulldogs, and that he has done. Now, moving it forward, look at the 2018 and 2019 classes, because every year Georgia signs dudes, brings in dudes, and they want to bring in a better group than the year before. And if Georgia hadn't been doing this, especially with the 2019 class, we've already talked about 2018 a little bit, but look at that 2019 class already, Brandon. When you add Cager and you add Wolf, because those guys are part of this class and part of an infusion of talent for this roster, and then you go guys like DJ Daniel, Jermaine Johnson, the two JUCOs. You got George Pickens, Nolan Smith, Trayon Walker. You already got a great heaping of contributions from the 2019 signees who've only been on this program as much as 11 months right now by this point. Look at how this 2019 class is paying off and helping the bottom line of this class.
Well, one of the things that comes to mind for me is, if you pay attention to NFL draft, which is also kind of a version of what coaches do in recruiting, which is pick players to be on their teams. The rules of the draft mean you only can pick one at a time, whereas in recruiting you can bring in 25 at once. But if you look at the long-standing NFL GMs, what you see is the batting average of the best and the worst really isn't all that different. There are going to be GMs, even the worst, that occasionally pick good players. There are going to be GMs, even the best, who occasionally pick busts. When you identify a population of one, it's just really hard to know who's going to be a player and who's not. Now, guys that do what you do for a living, recruiting analysts, if I say, hey, group guys by population, you can tell me who the 5 stars are, and you can tell me who the 4 stars are. Because a lot of that comes down to how big you are and how fast you run, right? It's pretty good and pretty easy to group guys on the basis of population. But if we step into that population and say, okay, now break down this guy compared to that guy, that gets far more difficult for everybody to do. It's one of the reasons why I always harp on this fact when it comes to recruiting, that as much as I love talking about the individual names, the overall numbers are far more important to me. The number of guys that you bring in more so than the individual names. I think for a fan to get too in love with any one guy over the larger population of players you're bringing in for a class, I think it's more likely that you're going to leave yourself to be disappointed, because no matter how elite of a class you sign and no matter how elite a player might be within that class, his chances of succeeding or failing would appear to be about 50%, which is why you want to make sure that you're stacking these classes, 17, 18, 19, the work that's being done right now for the class of 2020. You want to make sure you stack them on top of each other, one right after the other, because if you don't, you're not going to have enough players after a while.
I think a great example to magnify Brandon's point here is the Georgia outside linebacker position. So let's look at that. They've got some guys, and what I feel happens a lot of times is you bring them in, you sign the best guys you can, and then life happens, and then college football happens. I think Brenton Cox is an example of that. Mm-hmm. Brenton Cox comes in, and maybe there's not the fit there, and maybe he's just kind of seeing what the tea leaves look like there as far as his position. Look at the outside linebackers Georgia has signed. Robert Beal Jr., he was an Under Armour All-American. Brenton Cox, Aziz Ojulari. Nolan Smith, Jermaine Johnson, Adam Anderson. Some of those guys are going to be okay. Mm-hmm. Some of those guys are not going to pan out. Some of those guys are kind of going to get caught in the wash because of an extreme competition like that position at Georgia. And then some guys are going to hit it. And I think Azeez Ojulari definitely hit it. You can tell right now, early on in Nolan Smith's career, that's going to be a bullseye recruit too. Nolan Smith was exactly as advertised. So what you do with that ratio is you have some guys that are going to be very good, and they're going to play like an all-SEC type player. Some guys are going to be pretty good, and then another guy, you throw Azeez Ojulari into that. And then some guys, by just the nature of competition, aren't going to play as much or develop as much as others.
Well, the point you're making here is that, hey, Georgia doing this year after year is one of the reasons why it's in contention to win once again. However, you can also extrapolate within the position groups. When you show all those graphics of guys who are really contributing and really knocking out of the park, hard not to notice which position groups don't exactly index quite as highly on that list. Wide receiver comes to mind here for a moment. And lo and behold, when you look at the overall production on the field for Georgia right now, not a surprise that in terms of position groups, which one does the fan think has probably lagged behind the others in terms of their on-field productivity right now? I think you'd say wide receiver is probably a pretty good answer there to that question. And then lo and behold, go back and look at the recruiting efforts. Who's really working out? Who's really panning out? Oh, you see fewer receivers on that list than you do the other positions.
Well, let's kind of go in the numbers here, and let's magnify Brandon's point. Georgia, to get the upper echelon production that they desire to be a national contender at the wide receiver position, I'm going to trot out some names, Brandon.
All right.
Two of them that come to mind, Matt Landers and Tommy Bush. Remember Tommy Bush coming out of high school? He came from a very antiquated, they didn't throw the ball a lot, maybe only 100 times per year offense, but yet he was 6'4", 6'3", about 210 pounds, and running a 10.7 in the 100 meters. Matt Landers, the guy that's popping up on your screen right now, that's another guy.
Yeah.
You keep adding names. You got Matt Landers, Tommy Bush, Kieris Jackson, Tyler Simmons, Demetrius Robertson. You would think by the law of averages, at least one or two of those guys would be a monster playmaker there for Georgia, considering you've got 5 stars, you've got All-Americans, you've got an Alabama flip. You've got guys with a lot of the tools, and I think that's a lot of reasons why that wide receiver position is in flux for Georgia. Go ahead and throw Kieris Jackson in there. I think he is really starting to come on now. He showed a lot of good stuff against Missouri in the last few weeks, but he was sidelined by that wrist injury he suffered in the opening game against Vanderbilt. He came in as a highly ballyhooed recruit as well, but he also redshirted the previous year. Georgia, to be the team that I know this fella right here wants Georgia to be, they just need to have a lot more of those bullseye recruits at the wide receiver spot.
And to kind of wrap all this up before we do our top targets here in a moment, I guess the expectation is for some of the guys that we think are waiting their turn, biding their time, ready to have their big moment at Georgia, there's a very good chance that one or two of the names in the 2020 class may prevent that from happening. Guys that we thought of as about to break out in the class of 2018, this year maybe that isn't quite happening because of some of those 2019 names. And for some of those 2019s or maybe third year 2018 guys for the class of 2020 are on the field in 2020, it could be some incoming freshmen also prevent that from happening, that we are going to see in an elite recruiting program, which is what Georgia has been, wants to continue to be. You're going to see some guys who just jump the line. They're not going to wait their turn.
Yeah.
A talented enough player is not going to wait his turn to play. He's going to go in, unfortunately, if you're on the other end of this, he's going to take someone else's playing time.
Look at those 2019s right there. You see Nakobe Dean breaking through already, and that's maybe because of an injury to Channing Tindall and also maybe developing at a higher rate than Quay Walker did when he got into the program. And you remember the name Nate McBride. Monty Rice is a guy that's contributing heavily to the inside linebacker spot. Some guys are just going to sprout and pop and flash a little bit more than others. Think of the name Otis Reese as well from that 2018 class. You got to wonder, is next year the year for him if a Richie LeCount turns pro, or J.R. Reed's going to run out of eligibility? Well, next year's Georgia safeties, might it be Reese and Lewis Seen perhaps, or might it be LeCount and Lewis Seen perhaps? It's one of those guys. Georgia just puts together so many dudes where a couple of these guys are going to get lost in the shuffle a little bit.
All right, it's Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. That is Dog Nation's recruiting insider Jeff Sintel. I am Brandon Adams, and it is great to have all of you with us. I want to tell you about this from our friends at Kroger. Kroger's introducing a free pickup at all stores right in time for the busy holiday season. One of the things that Kroger knows is that this time of year, it's about getting time back because there's so much devoted to getting ready for Thanksgiving or getting ready for Christmas, or whatever holiday might be on the horizon, that any little thing that they can do to help you get a few minutes back in your day to spend time doing the things you really want to do, that matters. So this is the way you can do that. You can shop the Kroger app or on the website. You can place your order and then pick it up in person, all with free pickup. Really, really good stuff. So check that out as Kroger helps you get ready for the upcoming holiday season with some free pickup there on that. Place your order and step in and be ready to go. All right, speaking of being ready to go, we're also ready to go right now on our top targets for the class of 2020. We are now getting down to the wire. Some announcements coming up. One of them may be postponed, maybe good news for Georgia. Let's just sort of dive in and take a look at it all. Our top targets here, and name number one on the list. Is it the guy that it has been? It is still Keeley Ringo from Scottsdale, Arizona, the five-star cornerback. And Jeff, this is one of those guys that's been out there. We've been waiting on some news for him for a while. He's being deliberate in his process, but different than some of the 2020 names we talk about here on a fairly regular basis, has not had that chance to be back at Georgia in a while. What does that do for Ringo's recruitment, if anything?
I think it really just places the onus on his senior season right now. On our last program, folks got to hear from the soft-spoken Ringo.
They did.
He's a guy, and there's a little bit of newsy to that, Brandon. At the same time, there was confirmation that his finish line is indeed going to be the All-American Bowl in San Antonio. He is not going to enroll early, so he's going to participate in his senior track season there at Saguaro High School. Here's the other things he talked about. He wanted to come visit Georgia during the regular season on another unofficial. He wasn't able to do so. Does not seem like he's going to be able to do so. He's taking one official visit right now. That's to Oregon. So that means Texas and Georgia are definitely left. Georgia's likely going to come in the December evaluation or the December visit period.
Does that mean Georgia will get the last official visit then?
Well, it'd be very interesting to see how the timing works out. I know Georgia fans and this fella right here would love to see Georgia get the closing last at-bat visit for Keeley Ringo, because the expectation here, and I don't know if the outcome will be quite like Tyreek Stevenson, but remember Tyreek Stevenson made his decision during the early period. He signed his papers, and then he kept the emoji under wraps until he committed to Georgia during the All-American Bowl. So the thing there with Keeley, you got to think about there. The other bit of newsy information there with Keeley for me was he said he's going to take all 5 visits, and that means the Alabama Crimson Tide's going to get a visit, and that means the Ohio State Buckeyes are going to get a visit as well.
So we'll follow all that. Name number 2, top targets for the class of 2020. Another guy who's at least his camp we've heard from as of late here on Dog Nation. That's the 5-star linebacker Noah Sewell, who's coming up on hopefully trying to win a state championship for his high school team there in Orem, Utah. And Georgia fans hope beyond that he will eventually commit to the G. Anything new to give us on Sewell?
So Sewell, his father told us in the last week or so, and we had it on this program, then we had it on the site a little bit later. They're really just focused on Orem High School football right now. The playoff chase, no visits are on the books, no more official visits are on the books. A lot of people can extrapolate, again, like this guy, and think, well, he's seen Oregon, he's seen Georgia, what else does he need to see? It's going to be one of those 2 schools. Oregon right now trying to make a power play, at least for the potential utopian brilliance of Georgia's 2020 class. And Oregon right now could be seen as the chief contender for Georgia in the way of both Keeley Ringo and Noah Sewell. But interesting thing with Noah's in the 4th round of his Utah high school playoffs, and we'll have some of him on online chatter as well. But Brendan, he's playing on Thursday at 11 a.m. Tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., Noah Sewell is playing a playoff game in the 4th round of the Utah high school playoffs. Just a different world for people to be playing semifinal games. Now we get it for the championship round. It's at a big college stadium, and they got to pack like 6 games in 3 days.
They're playing at Rice Eccles, right?
Yeah, this is at Nevada Stadium. So University of Utah. Excuse me, I was thinking of his brother. But you try to shoehorn all those championship games into like 2 or 3 days, and that usually happens on championship weekend. But for Noah Sewell and his Orem Tigers, and guys, don't get twisted. You see a lot of O's right there. You see him wearing a lot of O's. His high school carries the same logo patterns as those Oregon Ducks, especially with the O. And playoff game at 11 a.m. on a Thursday. That's unique in my career to see a player playing a semifinal on a Thursday, especially that early.
Pretty odd there. Name number 3, top targets for the class of 2020. Jordan Birch, fresh off an official visit to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Is that right, this past weekend?
He did, and he took that one in, and it was another great visit for the LSU Tigers. They really got front and center in his viewpoint as well. And you had to think about.
Is he one of the ones that LSU players are talking to after the game?
Do you think they told him to go up there and point to him and talk to him? I mean, that would be a guy. You think about the contenders to Georgia for Jordan Birch, and one name that jumps up there, that school contenders, everybody associates it's going to be either going to be Georgia or Clemson with Jordan Birch, and if so, Clemson would have a haul, man. They would have, I think, 4 or 5 stars on the defensive line. They would have 5 top 100 defensive linemen for their defensive line if they add Birch. But I think the South Carolina ship, momentum keeps going in the opposite direction with them, especially with them wanting to play for a winning program and them losing to Appalachian State over the weekend. I think if there's another contender there for Jordan Birch, I think LSU is becoming a school that he will look at.
So do you think that Georgia is the top contender from outside the state of South Carolina for Birch's services?
I think so. Got to follow the visits. He's gone to Georgia so many times. We've cataloged them a bunch. I think it's Junior Day, it's G-Day, it's the scavenger hunt, it's the cookout, it's the unofficial visit for the South Carolina game where he was back, and he's going to be back again for an official visit as well. Jordan Birch might be a guy. Let me give you a little foreshadowing, Brandon. I think there are 3 names. Jordan Birch is one of those left for Georgia that might go to the old school signing day. So we'll have at least 3 names.
This is going to be February?
We're going to be it could be 3 names to think about there with a guy like Jordan Birch, and I think 2 others.
So y'all better be just getting ready for me to ask 1,000 questions about Birch between now and then. One more thing on this, and then we're going to move on, go to name number 4. Obviously, there is a follow the visits pattern for Birch. He's been to Georgia a lot. You've done a good job of chronicling that. But if one of your competitors is LSU, hard not to notice the way that LSU has kind of come out of nowhere as of late to win the Rick Gilbert recruitment and then get B.J. Ojulari on the heels of that. Now, Birch, I believe, is a better prospect than B.J. Ojulari is, but there's this example of this sudden late momentum from LSU in the recruiting trail, and it's probably fueled by the fact they're winning games on the field as much as they are right now. Does the follow the visits thing matter less for Georgia with Birch, given the fact that one of his potential competitors for Georgia is LSU, a team that has just popped very quickly as of late?
Oh, I think a lot of people, what they look at, Brandon, is we look at LSU and they think there's a suddenness to their recruiting and their momentum, and it has a lot to do with Joe Burrow. And they wonder if Brady's going to be a guy that's going to be putting that Tabasco hot sauce on that offense for years to come, or whether he's going to move forward in his career as a full-time coordinator.
Spoiler alert, he's not going to be there forever.
Or he's going to move up to an NFL coordinator role as well. I think that's one thing to think about. The interesting thing, and I want to make sure I get this right, the way LSU is building its football team. Now, there's a lot of splash guys where Brandon pays attention to the Rakeem Jarrett's. Brandon pays attention to the Rick Gilberts, even the trending stuff now here with Zachary Evans. But at my last count, Brandon, I think they're going to take 8 or 9. I think Birch would be the 9th defensive lineman that LSU would take in its 2020 class. And it sounds like they're trying to build things the old way with Ed Orgeron and a lot of defensive linemen. And the other thing that maybe would give you a little bit of pause, especially if you're a guy like Caleb Williams, is right now LSU only has 1 offensive line commitment for their 2020 class.
That's something to watch and pay attention to.
So there's an imbalance there definitely with defensive line and offensive line. And for LSU to probably get and claim a guy like Jordan Birch in this class, they probably have to maybe look at some attrition with their current defensive line.
Name number 4, top targets for the class of 2020. It's Darnell Washington outside of Las Vegas, and I'm assuming nothing's really changed with Washington as of late. This is one of the names that, certainly on the offensive side of the ball, of uncommitted players that Georgia fans probably feel the best about, and you can make a case that Washington is the most likely uncommitted player on either side of the ball for the Dogs right now. Anything new on Darnell?
Well, the thing with Darnell, his name crossed my mind, Brandon, when you were talking about the 2020 guys that could kind of have a fast pass and jump to the front of the line for playing time. I think Darnell's a guy that would do that should he sign with Georgia. One of those guys that's going to jump in early and become part of the playing mix and maybe do so ahead of a guy that's been there for a year or two. I mean, look at the film. Look at the way, I love how they got these new retro graphics on all these huddle film now where you can identify and you can keynote a guy in the middle of these. But big time size, athleticism, can go get a ball, can attack that middle of the field, and be a red zone weapon potentially for Georgia or any school in the future. Still got to figure out his remaining official visits as well.
Great to see that, and we'll find out what he does as far as those official visits go. How about name number 5? On our top targets of the class of 2020, we're coming up on a Thanksgiving week decision for Zacchaeus Walker. I hope folks got a chance to see the story that Jeff wrote with Walker and about Walker at DogNation.com last week. Very interesting young man. Certainly a lot to play for, representing his home state, maybe for the in-state school, UGA. Obviously, that's what dog fans hope for here, and now it's just the waiting game. Official visit coming up 2 Saturdays from now, and then a decision shortly after that.
Yeah, it'll be Thanksgiving week when he was with his family, and one point about Zacchaeus is he was in Alabama for his official visit for that game. Loved the atmosphere there, had a really great time in T-Town and everything else. Backing up a little bit, let me make sure I get Zacchaeus Walker update in there as well. The Zacchaeus Walker and Darnell Washington update in there as well. Darnell was also in Tuscaloosa for his official visit as well, and they got to see a lot of LSU points, and still the Alabama program trying to figure out a way to win with humility, like Bear Bryant used to say, and lose with humility, like Bear Bryant used to say as well.
So far, they're failing at that. So far, the lose with humility, not exactly seeing Tide fans pulling that off. Also, it must be weird for Alabama knowing that you're hosting these defensive linemen. Alabama used to be a place to be for defensive linemen. Boy, not quite as much as of late.
Yeah,
not quite as much as of late.
They're really kind of building their team a different way. Like, they got Bryce Young now, and Arian Smith was also there, a guy that will show up on our board a little bit later. But there's a lot of. Remember, Brandon, how every year in the recruiting industry there used to be this go-to move that a lot of recruiting reporters did, where they would write about recruiting battles between Georgia and Tennessee, recruiting battles between Georgia and Florida, recruiting battles between Georgia and Auburn. Well, folks, there are really not a lot of recruiting battles between Georgia and Auburn. A lot of them left for Georgia this cycle. Georgia, Oregon, Georgia, Clemson, and Georgia, Alabama.
Let's see, next name, top targets for the class of 2020, Theo Johnson. And, Jeff, there is some very interesting news. Maybe the most interesting news of any recruit we'll speak about today involves Theo Johnson. Can you tell us what you know about Theo?
So Theo has backed off his commitment date, which was supposed to be Monday. And Brandon was hoping to have, some Canadian bacon that day and anything else you could from that great nation.
Listen, I would really love to see Theo Johnson commit to Georgia, but I won't defile my mouth by eating Canadian bacon. The bacon that I eat was raised right here in the good old American South.
Would you eat Canadian bacon on the air if Theo Johnson commits to Georgia?
Listen, you know what? For Theo, I would do it because I think he's that good of a player. I would hold my nose and eat this wretched, poor substitute for true, honest, hardworking American bacon.
So, Dog Nation, can I get a little timeout, 20-second timeout? You saw a little sliver here of true inner circle Brandon Adams. When you get Brandon, I don't know, I would say get a little Dr. Pepper in him or something a little bit stronger than that. He is a inner food critic waiting to happen. When you get Brandon talking about food, some of his most fun conversations have to do with Brandon and food pairings.
Think Kroger sells Canadian bacon?
I'm sure they do.
Like the international section?
I'm sure they do.
Does that count as an international food?
So let me 20-second timeout over, recruiting time on.
So for Theo Johnson, if he commits to Georgia on the air, I'll eat a little Canadian bacon.
There you go, folks. So with Theo, I think the perceived leader by the industry in the clubhouse was he was trending towards Penn State. I think the decision to back off this decision march for him to Monday means that I think that's a good thing for everybody else in this race except for Penn State. He's still going to take his official visit to Michigan, I believe, this weekend. But to me, I just harken back to every time I've spoke to Theo Johnson. And he just didn't know. He had, this school he liked this part, this school he liked this part, and all these schools he liked this stuff in the middle. And he hoped to have clarity and hoped to have some sort of closure on his best school and his best fit after these rapid fire visits. Well, apparently that's not the case. Remember, he's going to be an early enrollee. He just hasn't found that trigger, that change agent, that catalyst that makes up his mind. We'll talk about this mythical feeling in the gut where you just know. And he's been to Iowa, he's been to Georgia, he's been to Penn State, he's going to Michigan. He still doesn't know. And when this thing goes longer and longer, I think the chances improve for a school like Georgia.
That's very interesting. Travis McCullough kind of brings up the same thing in our Facebook comment section. With Theo backing off his commitment date, he has to be coming. Will Scott also says that Canadian bacon is essentially just thin sliced ham. And some other folks kind of, echo the same thing on that. Wally Foster Jr. as well. My problem is, though, you can't call something bacon and not have it be bacon. We know what bacon is. You can't call this bacon. Leave it to the Canadians to absolutely just ruin something that.
Is that like calling somebody a tight end where he actually runs around and catches passes like a receiver?
I don't even want to go down that road. But nonetheless, for Theo, I might eat a little Canadian bacon. I may go to one of these fast food restaurants and sell some of it or something like that and get some of that. How about next name, top targets for the class of 2020? Dante Manning out of Kansas City. Dante fresh off an official visit to somewhere this weekend, although at the moment I can't remember where it was.
Forks up, Brandon. He did
That's right, Arizona State.
He checked out Arizona State. He showed out his track gear as well. He's going to run track and be a football player at his next school. The official visit for Arizona State was this weekend. This weekend he's going to go visit, name it. What school is an intersection between Georgia and recruiting dominance in the 2020 class? What else is it? He's going to go check out the Oregon Ducks program as well.
A lot of that, yeah.
You got a lot of crossover there, a lot of crossfire from a Tombstone reference. Dog Nation got you a little crossfire there with the Oregon Ducks in the 2020 class. He's supposed to be there, tentatively going to be there this weekend for an official visit. Reminder, last official visit, the one left for him in the chamber, is going to be the one with the Georgia Bulldogs in December before he would make up his decision. He is also not an early enrollee as well.
All right, next name, top targets for the class of 2020, Dante Manning. And let's see the next name after Manning. How about Arian Smith, as you mentioned before? Smith, a part of that visit to Alabama. Huge collection of recruits on hand there for that. And this was always, I think it's an important recruiting battle for Georgia, but always set up to be a tough one, just given the fact that Clemson's heavily involved here. Alabama seems to be coming on strong, trying to build an offensive component to its 2020 class with obviously getting the 5-star quarterback recently. Anything new on the situation with Arian Smith right now?
So I'm going to try and mimic how fast he plays on the field. The things to think about there with Arian Smith right now is Georgia, Alabama, the depth chart situation there. What they're trying to do. I'm trying to sound like that FedEx commercial from back in the day.
I noticed that.
Arian Smith, you got to look at Alabama and think depth chart. They throw the ball around a lot more. Alabama's likely to lose 3 wide receivers to the NFL. Will Georgia offer the same amount of depth chart availability? Maybe so, because Georgia still lacks that big size home run guy. I think the track ability there with Georgia is going to play a factor there with Arian Smith as well. But again, you wonder what will happen if Georgia, this is what we talk about on the Dog Nation forum, lasers in on Arian Smith and says, you're our guy. You're the guy we want. You're the guy we have to have in this program. You fulfill a specific need that Georgia doesn't have in its program right now. Reminder, Georgia has recruited Arian Smith with the Mecole Hardman type philosophy is we don't have a guy like Mecole. You would be our Mecole in future offenses, and look where Mr. Hardman wound up in the NFL, second-round pick with all that blazing speed. Arian Smith's even faster than Mecole Hardman, and that's something to shudder and consider there as well.
By the way, Radiant Noah, going back to one of our previous names, mentioned he'd love to have Dante Manning is part of this class, so we'll see how that plays out. Also good stuff from Jeff there on Arian Smith. But the next name, top targets for the class of 2020, another potential tight end option, Mikey Henderson. Kind of interesting to see 3 of those names on the board, especially if there's a chance that Georgia could kind of get back in it more for Theo Johnson. But Jeff Henderson is certainly a plenty impressive player in his own right who could potentially do some of the same things that Theo might do.
Red zone target. I spoke about a comparison I make with Mikey Henderson to Jalen Weidemeyer, another guy out of Texas that is currently has 6 touchdown catches in the SEC for the Texas A&M Aggies. I think Mikey Henderson, look at him go up and get a ball right there. Mikey Henderson Jr. can be that type of weapon for potentially the Georgia offense. He's really strong. He is a potential early enrollee as well. He's told me he won't have that come to Norman or not come to Norman meeting with Oklahoma until the end of his football season there. He's in Arlington, Texas for Ranch View, Texas. Look at them. He was a former quarterback. He is so strong, power cleaning pretty close to 400 pounds. And a lot of people wonder, is this what happens if Georgia goes 0 for 2 or 1 for 2 with Darnell Washington and Theo Johnson? Certainly that's a consideration there. But when you see what Mikey Henderson Jr. can do, he's down to Oklahoma and he's down to Georgia. It's just those 2 schools. He doesn't need to look anywhere else. Oklahoma wants to feature him as an H-back in that offense. Georgia wants to feature him as more of a traditional tight end, but also break him out wide, flex him out, be one of those flex-in hybrids for the Georgia offense.
Neil Adams asking about C.J. Stroud, the quarterback. We'll see if his name shows up on our top targets list before we're done here. How about the next name? Beyond Henderson. Now we do get to Stroud out of Rancho Cucamonga, California. C.J. Stroud is on here. This is obviously tough recruitment for Georgia. It's also not incredibly clear to me if Georgia's only recruiting him as a second quarterback right now. Is this an attempt to take two quarterbacks for the class of 2020? What's new on Stroud?
It's a take-two situation. C.J. Stroud is expected to visit Georgia unofficially for the Texas A&M game. He's also expected to give Georgia an official visit down the road. This is a recruit that right now, even though there's a lot of rumblings there with Ohio State there, as well as some other schools like UCLA and USC getting involved, he wants to take his decision to the old school signing day. He has no problems with taking it all the way out to February. He would be one of those 3 remaining targets that Brandon and I can chop up in January for the 2020 cycle. He's currently the nation's number 3 overall rated passer. Everybody wonders about Carson Beck and what this does. I think Carson Beck has been, he's aware of the situation that Georgia might go after a second quarterback, that they simply might need it with the situation with Jake Fromm potentially taking his talents to the NFL. What's the long-term future for DeJuan Mathis in the program as well? Georgia just can't go into a situation where they have potentially 2 or 3 scholarship quarterbacks in the program. That's why Georgia's pursuing the second quarterback.
It would be interesting if they were to somehow sign Stroud. If it's Stroud, if it's Beck, if it's Mathis, if it's Bennett, I'm assuming they would still be in the mix for a transfer quarterback there as well. We saw Auburn wage a quarterback competition last season during the offseason with 4 guys, ultimately whittled down to the starter, Bo Nix. I wonder if Georgia could really go through a spring competition with 5 different guys competing to start at quarterback.
Well, you wouldn't have spring with Stroud if he
right.
chooses Stroud, but you would have the graduate transfer that comes in there. The other thing I think folks need to know about Carson Beck is his season is over. Mandarin High lost to the number 1 seed last week, so now that number 18 is hung up in the locker for Mandarin High, the Mustangs in Jacksonville. He plans to enroll early, of course, but he also plans to move to Georgia in December to be there for bowl practices to get a head start on his Georgia career.
All right, good to know. How about the guys that just missed out on the list? Almost top targets. So we still talk about the running back, Don Chaney Jr. We still talk about the wide receiver, Xavier Henderson. So this list kind of whittled down a little shorter than it has been.
Yeah, I think Brendan likes that. He likes a little more clarity to it. You see a name like Zachary Evans is not there this week. You see names like, the Tank Bigsby's of the world, the Marshawn Lloyds of the world. I just don't think that's a reality. Georgia has 17 public commitments right now for the 2019 class, and I think the number that they can only get to is 24. And you look at that top targets list, well, there's about 4 or 5 names that a lot of folks might feel that, wow, Georgia must be in good position with a lot of those names because they're not recruiting or hosting backup or plan B or plan C targets at a lot of those positions.
Yeah, that is a very interesting point there as well, for sure. All right, it's our top targets here before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Speaking of Kroger, you can get ready for that holiday meal, whether it be Thanksgiving or Christmas, whatever, without a whole bunch of prep time or having to spend there cooking and heating it all up. The Kroger Home Chef's going to help you with this. You can get these choices. Listen to this. Either ham or turkey, plus all the sides, including stuffing, rolls, casserole, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, and more. It's a great deal. It's just $70. Order online, over the phone, or you can stop by and visit the Kroger Deli and kind of place your order there in person. But if you want this in time for Thanksgiving, you got to do so by November 25th. So the date to do that, to be ready for Thanksgiving, is November the 25th. All right, well, check in on some online chatter. Jeff's got some trivia for us coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, there was a commitment to Georgia this weekend, although it is for far into the future. For the class of 2023, Trayon Webb is an impressive current high school freshman, plays for a powerful program in Northeast Florida known as Trinity in Jacksonville. And, Jeff, Georgia liked him enough to take this commitment, even though he won't arrive at Georgia until we're old and gray, at least seemingly, the same year that Georgia travels to Norman, Oklahoma to take on the Sooners, by the way.
Wow.
What is the story here?
So I got to do something to get Brandon to sit there and go, Jeff, 2023, man, come with it. Make me interested in this young man. Well, first of all, here's the thing to think about. We talked about bullseye recruits. Let's say Kendall Milton absolutely is a DeAndre Swift type factor out of the gate in the Georgia offense. He's probably going to be a 3-year and out back. Do you folks realize that Kendall Milton will have enrolled at Georgia, spent 3 years in Georgia, and be in the NFL by the time Trayon Webb plays for the University of Georgia.
Pretty amazing, right?
Some other things that boggle my mind here is this guy is just 14 years of age. He won't be 15 until late December, Brandon. So that means when he comes to the University of Georgia, he will be an early enrollee. In 2023, he will just be 18 years and 1 month old. So that will be a very young prospect. If that's not enough for you, I got two more. Number one, Todd Hartley, when he was at Miami, was at Trinity Christian in Jacksonville watching a practice. And this is when he was still at Miami. And so Trinity Christian, Florida rules are different. You can practice and play with the varsity as long as the entire school is housed on the same campus. Mm-hmm. Trinity Christian is a K through 12 school. So he saw 7th grade Trayon Webb. This was the spring of his 7th grade year. Saw him make some runs. He was there to look at Marcus Crowley, another guy that was currently committed to Miami, a guy that ended up going to Ohio State. And he's like, who's that kid? And he was about 5'11" and about 180 pounds at the time. And he thought he was a high school junior.
Wow.
He offered him in his 7th grade year, folks. This wasn't a holdback situation. This was a 7th grader, a true bona fide 7th grader. He offers him. Then Trayon picks up a couple more offers. Hartley ends up at Georgia, and then Hartley reoffers him. Folks, he had carries, meaningful carries, including a 94-yard touchdown run as an 8th grader for a 7-time state championship program in Florida. And he came to Georgia with a little hankering last week for the Missouri game. Like, he was feeling it. He was thinking about it. And he knew, and this will probably show up in a DogNation.com story later, he knew when the lights came on in the fourth quarter, Brandon. The light show came on in the fourth quarter. Now, let me test your mettle here. Was it the red LED Kanye West power lights that swayed him to commit to the G? Was that his I'm going to be a dog moment, or was it the old school Krypton fanfare white lights that sent things over the top of this recruit?
It could be that's just the latest he's ever been able to stay out before. So, I mean, from that standpoint, he may have just been having a good time being able to do that. I mean, listen, I think the light show for Georgia we're going to win a lot of recruits to the program.
Trayon Webb, he saw the white lights. He saw it in person. He thought it was one of the most amazing and coolest things he's ever seen. His second choice was Auburn. His first choice was Georgia, and he knew at that point that he was going to be a dog. Once that Krypton fanfare and those lights went up and those fours went up, and then he said the one with Kanye West and the red lights was just an extra great
Honestly,
thing.
I have to say, and we'll get back to the regular content in a minute, after they light up Sanford with the Krypton theme and the white lights, the phone lights, when the lights go completely out in the stadium and they do bring in the red, I've got to say that is rivaling the light up Sanford as the coolest moment during any night game. I have to say that the lights have made that moment way better. After the light up thing, it goes completely dark, you get a big cheer from the students, everything turns red. I got to say that does really work really well. I could see Trayon or a number of recruits being impressed by that.
So I got one thing. Everybody listen in real close. Let's all gather around, have a huddle. I'm going to ask an objective question to you and everybody out there in Dog Nation on the live streams.
All right.
Does Georgia need to change up the light show in the fourth quarter?
No, it's a tradition.
I think Krypton is fine, but do they need to add the second part? Do they need a new song? Do they need to incorporate the white and the red lights?
No.
Do they need a new song?
It's fine the way that it is. They got the thing that comes after that now that people enjoy, but people like this the way that it is. This has taken off since 2017. People like it the way that it is.
So, Brandon Adams, I would like to call on the gentleman for a corresponding argument. Connor, what do you have to say about that, my friend?
A little bit. I don't have an earpiece in today.
So I have one suggestion on how to fix or slightly improve the light up experience. I think that they need to go red while they're playing Krypton Fanfare.
I could see that. However, if you do go red for the Krypton, when you then go red after it, you kind of take some of that away. But I do think red with the lights would look pretty good.
And look, I enjoy Kanye West music as much as anybody, but Power is not a good song. So let's just get that song out of there. I'm totally fine with going red with the cell phone light ups with Krypton Fanfare playing all at the same time.
I think sooner or later they got to, and that's a great dissenting opinion there from the behind the glass with Connor Riley. I think sooner or later the shelf life on power Kanye West will have to change. That might be a seasonal thing, but there is a better, cooler, you could go a number of artists right there that are really popular with the recruits and with the young people out there. I don't know if Kanye West power really hits the bullseye for me and the Georgia fan experience. Might even need to be something a little bit more Georgia-centric, something to do with dog, something to do with red. I don't know if that one totally hits the mark for longevity there.
But the Krypton theme you can't touch. If you want to replace the Kanye song, I'm fine with that. But the Krypton thing you can't touch. People really, really enjoy that right now. All right, why don't we do this? Let's do a little online chatter. And after Trayon Webb made some news online this week, not the only Georgia recruit kind of doing some of the same kind of stuff. So, Jeff, why don't you walk us through some of that?
All right, online chatter. This is where Brandon makes sure that he's caught up with everything going on, and including some of those reports about recruits leaning one way or the other.
I like that.
Let's start out with online chatter. We got a lot of stuff to talk about this week, so let's go rapid fire through them. The first one up out of the box would be So I like this one. We're gonna take about a minute with this one. Brandon, this is Noah Sewell. This is Noah Sewell in Utah. And this was a play in this game. Let's watch it again. Where this fumble happens, the kid's distraught, he's devastated. It was a changing point in the game. And look at Noah right there.
Yeah.
Noah right now is getting verbal abuse from fans, other coaches. He is like Godzilla through the Utah high school football playoffs. So he's been getting a lot of the anti-hero stuff with a lot of opposing fan bases. And look at that. Class, poise, helping out a guy, saying everything's all right, getting in his face. That's the type of guy you want on your football team.
Yeah, that's really nice
Period.
to see. I like that from Noah Sewell. He certainly has the look of a guy that's going to be a team leader where he ends up going to school. Obviously, I hope that it's Georgia. I've grown to really like him as a player, and that video is certainly an example of that.
And when I saw that, Brandon,
verbal abuse may be a little strong.
Oh no, he is getting verbal abuse from opposing fan bases. And I'm gonna say
maybe a little strong.
I'm gonna say this. I almost, when I saw the combination of what Noah Sewell's done the last couple of weeks, and then that clip right there for what it means beyond just playing well between the lines.
Yeah.
I almost put Noah number one this week in the top targets list.
Well,
this is the closest I came to moving Noah up to number one because I think what he could add to the Georgia program, more than 100 tackles a year, that reflects right there how Noah Sewell is different than a lot of the elite recruits we see every year.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Kirby has talked about is he likes guys who win state championships. He's mentioned that before. Right now, Noah's trying to do that, and he's also got this kind of intangible quality about him as well. So that's definitely a player I'd love to see. John Benton says good character guys are essential for winning teams. Sewell would make a DGD, and I think that's well said by John Benton.
Well said. Now, I think we've got another Noah here. Now, look at this. Now, Brandon, let me introduce you to Utah high school football.
Yeah, so was this game played like Wednesday at like noon or something like that?
First of all, I want you to go back to your play-by-play days, Brandon. Channel that BA from days before. Call this play, and I'm going to tell you right now, this was ruled. Let's play that again. This was ruled as an incomplete pass. Watch this, Brandon.
Let's see. So the quarterback takes it. Wow, that's quite a call there. How are we going to get that as a pass? First of all, it's thrown backwards. It's pretty clearly a toss sweep of sorts, handoff of sorts. And how are we going to get that as an incomplete pass? It's hard to understand. This is a Noah Sewell game?
Noah Sewell game.
I like the uniforms, though.
I mean, if anybody can enlighten me on how through the rafters and page 92, section 19, corollary 8, 19.4b, anybody that has that being a pass, when you see that reflection of high school football in Utah for a state playoff game, this was a quarterfinal game, It makes me think like they're just pulling soccer referees out of the woodwork to come work these games.
Bryce Dixon says on Facebook, that better not happen on Saturday. Bryce, you and I both know I wouldn't put anything past the SEC refs. Of making a call that bad, I could certainly see them doing that.
Again, that boggles my mind. I had to watch that several times. How in the world? Maybe they have a different rule book in Utah how that was an incomplete pass.
Oh, they have a different rule book for sure.
Next online chatter, we're going to get some names. And look at that. This is what happens also. This is how they're tackling Noah Sewell these days in the Utah high school playoffs. Look at that, Brandon.
Yeah, there you go. A little trip there for him.
Is that rugby-style tackling? Is that what they do, Australian-style tackling?
But that's not illegal for a defensive player, is it? No. It's illegal for an offensive lineman. That's not illegal for a defensive player. Now, but honestly, if I'm getting ready to make the tackle, I'd much rather go for the soccer-style trip than the head-on collision, because we've already seen what Sewell does with that. He loves to get that pad level down low and put somebody in the turf there.
I mean, Brandon, don't you want to wrap him up, hold on, and wait for your buddies to get there as well?
Not for me. Listen, I'm going to let Noah go about his business. I'm not going to try to wrap him up at all.
You know,
look at the Foreman he's running with on that one.
One of the things about the Noah Sewell recruitment for Oregon is they're trying to get him as an offensive weapon a little bit, get him involved a little bit offensively as well. That's a variant from how Georgia would plan to use it.
Devin Glenn says it is illegal. It's not illegal to trip a guy like that, is it?
I think it is illegal, but it's definitely illegal. But I didn't kind of dispel what you were thinking there, because I don't understand Utah high school football from the previous clip. If that is called an incompletion, well, how in the world can you expect those astute referees to notice that being a trip?
Well, yeah, there you go. Maybe not.
So we had a lot of Noah Sewell this week. So moving on, look at this one. This is Noah Sewell's teammate. Are you ready for this one?
Oh, that's the 2021 offensive lineman?
Offensive lineman.
You know I love football players that dunk basketball. That's a pretty impressive young man right there.
Kingsley Sumatia, he's also out of Orem High School. Sam Pittman has been talking to him, recruiting him.
That's very nice.
And you know what, Brandon, if a certain 2020 prospect would sign with Georgia, then the narrative about Georgia not having any players of Polynesian descent would be off the table.
Yeah, that's very nice.
I would think if Georgia does eventually sign Noah Sewell, the way Sam Pittman recruits and the way Georgia has targeted Kingsley a little bit, because this is going to be a big class for tackles. You know, you've got Micah Morris, you got Amarius Mims, you got Terrence Ferguson, Donovan Jackson. Those are some of the names for Georgia. Be very interesting, the Georgia chance for Kingsley should Noah Sewell come to Georgia.
All right, next piece of online chatter here.
Online chatter. Brandon, this is for your golfing side right now. Sometimes you catch Brandon.
Oh, this is a little Top Golf. And is this Top Golf Phoenix? Is that where this is?
This is Keeley Ringo, man. Can you judge a five-star corner by his golf swing?
Listen, I'm just glad he's having a good time, man.
Sometimes Brandon, when he's lost in thought when we're at pre-show meetings, he'll be mimicking some air swings and everything else. Yeah. So this proves
Needs a little more backswing, probably. A little more backswing.
This goes to show.
Swinging left-handed, though. Good for him on that.
You could be a...
Is he left-handed?
You could be a monster, probably lines up that way. It could be a monster athlete. You could run a 4.3, you can be 6'2", 210, and a future NFL Sunday guy, dripping with future NFL potential and much less college potential. Swinging that golf club still pretty hard to do.
That's pretty good. I'm glad to see him having fun, though. Maybe he can do, who was the video we saw hitting the golf club in Sanford Stadium, kind of like a Georgia's version of a Top Golf? Maybe Ringo can do that when he takes his official visit to Athens a little bit later on.
The boys always end up on Sanford Stadium grounds during those December official visits.
Because, now with the way the West End Zone thing is, you can put like a little, patch of turf right there, and you can hit the ball right into Sanford Stadium.
Straight down the middle. You use that often untargeted middle of the field.
Straight's overrated. In golf, hitting it straight's overrated. You want to be able to
hit bombs.
Well, you just want to be able to move the ball a little bit. You want a little left to right movement or something like that.
Moving on to the top targets. You got some Keeley Ringo golf, and I caught Tate Ratledge doing this, guys. This is a 53-yard punt in a playoff game. Now he gets a decent little roll, but look what Tate gets.
It's really not a bad kick.
He got a lot of air time. The hang time there is pretty good. And
gosh, it reminds me so much of that picture of Andy Reid from punt, pass, and kick back when he was a much younger child than Ratledge is now. It's not a bad kick.
Last week's game, Darlington versus Fellowship Christian, was a meeting of 9-0 teams. Now, Darlington got beat pretty bad, something like 35-42-7. That game was getting out of hand by the time I left at the half. But one thing I did see, Brandon, I am an eyeball witness. Give Fellowship Christian some credit. Maybe they had some sort of Gipper speech from their special teams coach. But Tate Ratledge was punting out of his own end zone in that game. It's probably 33 degrees. Look at the frost coming out of his mouth right there. Fellowship Christian went after Tate Ratledge and tried to block one of his punts.
Listen, that's tough, man. That's pretty tough, right?
Do you want to talk signing up for Noah Sewell or whatever?
All things being
what if you're going to be a gunner and come flying into Tate Ratledge's big foot inside the punt on a punt block?
Yeah, that's quite a performance right there from Tate Ratledge for sure.
Tate Ratledge, more online chatter. I think we got a few more arrows in our quiver here for online chatter. Brandon always loves these high school highlights. And Brandon,
I do.
This is the last one for Josh Braun, the Brontosaurus. Look at that.
Look at two guys.
He's got a 2-for-1 pancake special right there. Of course, they don't serve those at Waffle House, only IHOP. And this was funny. In social media, this came out. Mike, because Josh doesn't have any social media, but underneath this thread was a reply from Kendall Milton, and Kendall said, "Save some of that for my son when they get together in college."
That's pretty good. You like to see that.
Taking on two guys. Could that be taking on two Tennessee Volunteers in the future, or two Auburn defenders in the future?
Bron's had a very impressive senior season. He's put a lot of those highlights together. He's going to look great in a Georgia uniform for sure.
Enrolling early, Joshua Braun will be one of those Georgia enrolling early guys. There's already 6 guys for the class of 2020 that will be enrolling early.
Mike D, by the way, wants to let Tate Ratledge punt for Georgia. I got to say, there's something pretty satisfying about watching Ratledge do that. I don't know. I kind of like watching him punt.
Shows he's got a little bit of athletic ability to be able to do that. And I mean, folks, that's just not that punt. That's not an aberration of him getting his leg into one. His net last year as a junior was 39 yards per punt, a punting the average. And folks, I've never seen an offensive lineman punt that well, punt like that.
Get the leg in the air a little bit, not bad.
That's what Tate Ratledge can do. Any more online chatter, sir? Look at this one, Brandon. Number 1 player in the country, class of 2021, Corey Foreman established his top 10. And look at that. That looked like a cloning project right there. You got Clone Wars, Recruiting Wars. He's got, which one of those, Brandon? Let me check your eyeball test. Which one of these schools does not belong in Corey Foreman's top 10?
Yeah, look at Vanderbilt there. It almost looks like it's a schedule for a certain team, and like Vanderbilt's like the homecoming date. What is Vanderbilt doing in this top 10 list right now?
Apparently he values academics in the city of Nashville and that nightlife. Maybe he's got some friends and family there.
Good for him.
Georgia got a visit from him during the summer. Be interesting to see if Georgia gets a late unofficial from Corey Foreman again this year, because Georgia's got to try and keep pace there with those Clemson Tigers in that recruitment for another player out of California, because Corey Foreman was able to make an unofficial visit this year to Clemson for the Texas A&M game.
Oh, there you go. So pretty impressive there for a big name in the class of 2021. How about this?
How about a 5-star defensive tackle, 2021 class?
I like this edit, too.
He's got a top 12. Now, Brandon, can you explain to me how that relates to Alabama? Mobile, Alabama? I don't know if the background.
Maybe he's just, I don't know. Maybe it's like he's so cool, he's ice cold or something like that. That's when I get the snow-capped mountains. I'm not really sure. That's a really good question, actually.
Trying to get up to the mountaintop. But anyway, Lee Hunter just picked up a recent offer from Auburn. That's going to be one to watch as well. Georgia's been recruiting him hard for a long time. That's a top 5 defensive tackle.
That's also quite a choice of your top 12 in terms of programs of varying prestige.
Can we flash that one back up there again? Which one of those has more teams that – which one of those has a – between Hunter and Foreman, is there any school here that sticks out like a sore thumb more than Vanderbilt?
He's from Mobile, so that explains the Ole Miss part of it a little bit more. You know, although Ole Miss is more the north part of the state, so it's actually not even that close to Mobile. So Ole Miss, I would say, is the interesting one there for Hunter.
Top 11. I think he dropped to top 11 at high noon earlier this week for Lee Hunter on Monday. Online chatter, all good? We got more. So this is a guy, the 2021 guy out of
McEachern. It's going to be 4 hours long today.
Chief Borders. I'll try to make this.
I do like his name. Chief Borders is a great name.
Chief commits to Florida. Of course, Georgia's got a lot of inside linebacker and outside linebacker targets in the 2021 class it likes. He felt a certain type of way about Florida.
Well, good for him.
One thing to think about there, Boogie, Jalen Kimber, and those two young men will be on different sides of the Georgia-Florida rivalry. I'm talking about Jalen Kimber, the 2020 4-star, nation's number 5 cornerback, who will also enroll early in January.
Well, there you go.
Next up on the board, Brandon, I got to give you some Gunnar Stockton.
There you go. I love it. The 2022 quarterback representing Raven County.
Now watch this. Gunnar Stockton out of Raven County, number 2 overall prospect for 24/7 Sports. What type of quarterback? We got some back-to-back Player of the Week nominations there. First of all, Gunnar Stockton has 100 career TDs.
By the way, whoever's doing the sales for the Raven County Player of the Week, they got like 15 sponsors. Good for y'all. Get that money.
So, but look at this. Look at the quick back-to-back for Gunnar. One thing to bring about Gunnar, he's already had 100 career TDs running or throwing in his sophomore year. Brandon, that's a lot of touchdowns.
It is.
But look at this. One of these weeks, he has 6 touchdowns passing, right? The next week, look at the next one, Brandon. 5 touchdown rushes.
Pretty impressive.
Get you a quarterback that can go back-to-back weeks with 5 rushing touchdowns or more, or 6 passing touchdowns or more.
You think Georgia leads for Gunnar Stockton right now?
Gunnar's got a lot of Clemson thought, North Carolina thought, but there are a lot of homegrown ties between Georgia and Raven County's Gunner Stockton
Boy,
as
it'd
well.
be a shame to see another great in-state quarterback get away. That'd be really, really a shame.
And while we're on the Gunner Stockton subject, Brandon, this is Braxton Lee Hicks, and also his favorite target out of Raven County.
Mm-hmm.
He just committed to Georgia to be a preferred walk-on wide receiver.
You'd like to see that.
In the 2020 class. Brandon, how do you feel about his go-to man going to Georgia as a preferred walk-on? 2 years later down the road, he might be able to throw passes to his boy again.
Every little bit helps. First of all, I'm a huge proponent of the preferred walk-on status anyway. I think it's a great way to be part of a program, and you see some guys work their way into being real contributors that way. So I'm happy for Hicks there in that regard. And if it greases the wheels a little bit with Stockton, which is also another one of those names for kind of on down the line, but not too early to start thinking about quarterbacks, any little bit can kind of help here.
So Braxton Lee Hicks might be a potential Jalen Johnson or a Willie Erdman down the line, those valuable walk-on receivers that get some shine and some time at Georgia. And let me just ask you, this is the reaction that a lot of Georgia fans will probably see to this Braxton Lee Hicks commitment. Do you feel better about him committing to be a preferred walk-on at Georgia rather than Clemson? Don't you feel a lot better about that way or the other?
For sure, no doubt about that.
There you go, Braxton Lee Hicks, which is interesting. Anybody that's going through adding their family, that's an interesting name when everybody that's had kids or is a father or whatever to hear a name called Braxton Lee Hicks. Everybody knows about that if you're on the dad team or the mom team.
Yeah, you're right about that. I noticed the same thing.
Online chatter, Brandon's 4-hour show. Do we have at least one more online chatter? We're good, Brandon.
All right, with that in mind, it's Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. As we kind of creep past the hour mark here, let us do some weekly six-pack, some trivia. Let's get stumped. Let's get some questions right, and we'll have a good time with that.
All right, Brandon. This is the time of the show where I think Brandon, let some air out. He always says we're going so long here in six-pack trivia, so let's hurry up and let's giddy up. Let's act like we're on the Gus bus and get through these trivia questions. Of course, this is mostly Auburn, but I got one little nugget for you from Georgia, Florida.
Okay.
Brandon. Georgia next year, of course, will be going for a 4-game winning streak against those Gators. How long has it been since UGA held a 4-game winning streak against the Gators?
Was it 85, 86? No, I feel like they lost a game in that time frame. For lack of a better answer, I'll say late 80s, which would have been, let me just say 25 years ago. 25 years ago.
Correct answer, Brandon.
Years. I should have known that.
It's 38 years. Got a typo. I think that was my own doing there. But Georgia established a 4-game winning streak against the Gators with a 26-21 win in 1981.
Okay.
The Bulldogs then pushed that streak out to 6 games in 1983.
Okay, there you go.
38 years, Brandon.
Boy, nice to think that you might be able to add to that again next year. That'd be a lot of fun. By the way, good job, Jay Squillis and Dennis Brown, for getting the answer correct.
Good job, guys. Everybody remembers that 26-21.
4 in a row is a big deal.
26-21 score was a huge score in the Georgia-Florida rivalry for back-to-back years for different reasons. Okay, Brandon, blue chip count here. Auburn, Georgia. We do this every week.
Yep.
Everybody knows Georgia has 73 by now, but how many blue chip 4 or 5 stars has Auburn signed in comparison with Georgia back to 2016?
Yeah, so this one for me, between 42, 47, 52, 57. Remember, like 2 signing classes ago, Auburn signed like 17 4-star guys. They've signed a lot of low 4-star guys, but they've signed a lot of 4-star guys. So I'm going to assume that the highest answer is the correct answer. They're not in the same ballpark as Georgia, but they got a lot more than a lot of other programs do. So I'm going to say that 57 is more likely the correct answer here on this one. John Benton says C. Chuck Pearson says B, the rifleman. Chadwick Ivory does say D. He's with me there on that. So I'm going to assume the highest is the correct. I'm going to say it's 57.
Skinny Water M8 on YouTube says B. Chadwick has D. Joe Barger has a C. Stuart Nix, probably no relation to Bo and Patrick, has A as his answer. Brandon, the correct answer, you're not going to get this one, my friend. You're going to get a buzzer. The correct answer is 52. Not the highest, but kind of in there. And I tried to pepper a range between 47, 52, 57 because that was kind of what I knew you probably would have thought it felt like.
They have had a lot of transfers there.
Yeah, remember Kyle Davis was supposed to be a senior on this team, Antoine Jackson, Calvin Ashley. There's a lot of guys that Auburn has signed that are no longer with their program. Number 3 on our six-pack trivia. Brandon's moving on to his third dose of six-pack trivia. He's currently 1-1, I believe. Did you know?
Yep, that's right.
1-1. Which one of these elements is not true? Not true about the Auburn and Georgia recruiting rivalry of late. A, Auburn and Georgia signed the same amount of blue-chip recruits in 2016. B, the Tigers have signed up 14 fewer 5-star recruits than Georgia since 2016. C, Auburn has not had a top 5 recruiting class under Gus Malzahn. Mm-hmm. Or D, Auburn has not had a top 5 recruiting class this decade.
All right, which one of these is not true? I think it comes down for me to the top 5s here. Has Malzahn had a top 5? That seems a little high for him. Not had a top 5 this decade. That would date back to 2010. Is there a chance that Chiswick had a class that high? I don't know the answer to this question. I'm going to say the answer is D, although I'm tempted to say A, that maybe Georgia with a number 8 class bested Auburn for the class of 2016. I'm going to say it's D.
Georgia boy agrees with you. He says amen to you on D. Christie just says B. Skinny Water M8 says D. Chadwick Ivory has C. Stuart Nix has B. Giving some love to the YouTube crowd there as well. Range of opinions here, Brandon. Let me tell you, let's look at those one more time. I'm going to see if I can debunk them one by one. First off, the answer is D, Brandon. You got that one right. Bell him up. Ring Brandon's bell, but Georgia has signed 13 more 5-stars. I think the number is 17 to 4. Mm-hmm. They both had 16 blue chippers in 2016. Gus Malzahn has never signed a top 5 recruiting class at Auburn.
Yeah.
And D,
it's just getting hard to sign a top 5 class. It just is.
D, the correct answer is Chiswick in 2011. Actually had the number 5 class.
Coming off the heels of a national championship.
Number 5 class. That's about as good as Auburn has ever done recruiting.
Jace Willis 3 for 3, by the way.
Modern industry. Number 4. You ready for this one?
Always.
Auburn currently has more commits. You'll like this one. Auburn currently has more commits from the state of Georgia than the Bulldogs do. True or false?
Yeah, I can only name one of them off the top of my head, but I'm going to say the answer to that is probably true.
Counting 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023?
Yeah.
Brandon says true.
I'm going to say true.
Let me see what. Chadwick Ivory is actually 0 for 3. Devonta Lett has B. Devon Glenn has a false. Skinny Water M8 has A. Guys, the correct answer is true. Auburn has 6 commitments from Georgia.
How about that?
In the 2020 class.
Auburn's also a lot closer to certain places in Georgia. I mean, we've been over this 1,000 times, but geographically it's just true. Auburn, where it sits, is a lot closer to certain parts of Georgia than UGA is.
Yeah, and the number is 8 to 5, I think. Georgia's got 4 in the 2020 class and 1 in the Auburn has 6 in 2020, 1 in 21, and 1 in 2022. The Bulldogs only have 4 in the 2020 class and 1 in 2021. That would be David Daniel out of Woodstock High School. So right now, Auburn with more commitments than Georgia in the program.
Well, there you go.
Number 5. Which one of these things is not true? Not true about the Georgia-Auburn all-time series. A, Georgia has more all-time wins, bowl wins, conference championships, NFL draft picks, and NFL first-rounders.
Okay.
B, the Bulldogs have won 11 out of the last 14 meetings.
Okay.
C, Auburn has won 3 of the last 5 meetings in Jordan-Hare Stadium.
Let's put a pin in that one.
D, the Tigers have not won back-to-back games against Georgia since 2001. Not true. Not true.
Let's put a pin in that one. The D is not true because Auburn won in 04 and 05.
Matter of factly, huh?
Yeah.
Brandon.
The 05 loss for Georgia was a heartbreaker.
Heartbreaker. And that was when they got Georgia. That was a tough one. And that was when Georgia, it cost Georgia a lot of bigger things in that year as well.
Sure did.
But that was a game which will live in infamy for many reasons.
Heartbreaker.
They won the Auburn, Georgia, Sanford, Jordan-Hare back-to-back there.
The 2004 Auburn team, you shake their hand. That was a good team. It's supposed to be a good year for Georgia, but the 2004 Auburn was better. But Georgia losing at home to Auburn in 2005 was a bad loss.
That was that late drive and the final.
Yeah, Georgia gave up like 300 yards of offense in the fourth quarter alone. I mean, it was just a disaster.
Especially, and Auburn went like 85 yards in like 27
There was the weird touchback fumble thing late in the game, too, which, I don't even really remember what it was. I just remember being mad at the time.
Yeah, but Dog Nation friends, viewers, and listeners, keep in mind, Georgia's won 11 out of the last 14, definitely controlling this rivalry as much as Florida ever controlled the Georgia-Florida rivalry. Second thing to think about there is Auburn and Jordan-Hare Stadium have won 3 out of the last 5 meetings between Georgia. And that's why guys like this, and that's why guys like that, and that's why all you folks are a little worried about this weekend.
But that's also why Dog Nation Retaliation T-shirt, 28-7.
Oh, Brandon.
Trying to give some good vibes out there. Trying to do what we can.
We don't need to get the ladies any thirstier than they already are, Brandon.
Let's put 3 minutes on the clock. We will do some hurry
Whoa,
up.
whoa,
Oh, my God.
Whoa.
Oh, my gosh.
Hey, what are you? Are you a Utah high school football official? Can you not count to 6? Offsides.
All right, sorry.
Brandon. And you know, I was even nice to you this week, man. I gave you the dumbed down, Dumber and Dumber edition.
All right.
Which one of these famous persons is not connected to Auburn University or Auburn, Alabama? Brandon, there's just one in every category.
Yeah.
Just one. A, Jimmy Buffett. B, Lionel Richie. C, Tim Cook. D, Vince Dooley. Or E, Dr. Phil.
So Dooley went to Auburn, of course. Tim Cook famously went to Auburn. Jimmy Buffett is from Pascagoula, Mississippi, so I'm assuming he did not go to Auburn. Although I guess he did spend some time in Mobile as well, which is kind of close to there. So let me see the other names between Dr. Phil and who's the other one? Lionel Richie. Somehow I want to say that Lionel Richie's not connected to Auburn. Although there have been a steady stream of recruits leaving on a midnight train to Georgia. But I'm assuming that Lionel Richie is not one of those.
Ooh, that was nice there. You just dropped that one in there.
Thank you.
Midnight train to Georgia was actually Gladys Knight.
Close enough.
Close
enough.
If Brandon says it, Connor, it's always close enough, right?
Close enough.
First of all, let me get your Q rating test. Who's the most famous person on that list outside of Vince Dooley?
Outside of Dooley, of course. Probably Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil's been Oprahized.
So your final answer was
Well, nobody
what?
could pick out Tim Cook out of a lineup.
He's the richest one of those, no doubt about that, though.
Yeah.
Which one of those was your answer on this one, Brandon?
I don't remember. Lionel Richie.
For the record, Lionel Richie. No, man, it's actually Dr. Phil.
Is that right?
Everybody else, Jimmy Buffett, Lionel Richie, Vince Dooley, Tim Cook, all connected to Auburn, Alabama, or Auburn University.
Okay, there you go.
Can you believe Lionel Richie?
Jimmy Buffett went to Auburn?
Can you imagine walking by an Auburn tailgate on Saturday and seeing Lionel Richie there by some chance? Would that not blow your mind?
Yeah.
I don't know why the Auburn student unit has not ever put together a homecoming concert with Jimmy Buffett and Lionel Richie. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Maybe
Even for the 2020 student.
Seems like Lionel Richie would be more appropriate at a Vanderbilt game, but nonetheless.
The Commodore.
Yeah. Now I'm kind of redeemed myself. A little bit more accurate joke.
Oh, wow. No. You can cross-reference Jimmy Buffett with a pun on
So Jimmy Buffett went to Auburn.
Yep.
I did not know that. That's interesting. All right.
Or at least attended. I don't know about his diploma status or whether he got all his fees paid or whatever, but Jimmy Buffett is related to Auburn University.
Well, there you go. So now, what if we put 3 minutes on the clock? We'll kind of knock out some questions and comments. We will see if we can get some recruiting stuff going here. Chuck Pearson said, how about dancing on the recruiting ceiling for Lionel Richie? That's not bad. And that's at least a song that he actually did sing there. So that's not too bad. Other recruiting.
How about all night long? Is that how Georgia's going to run the ball against Auburn?
I like that. That's not there. Not too bad there as well. Other recruiting comments here on both Facebook and YouTube. It always takes folks a little bit of time to kind of get back and do the recruiting stuff again. Bobby Ryle says, I thought Buffett went to Ole Miss. Like I said before, he's from Pascagoula, Mississippi. I just happen to know that. So, Bobby, I'm not so sure I don't trust you on this one. Mark Godfrey brings up a pretty good point. For the Fromm family, tough situation on Saturday. I mean, you assume they're rooting for their quarterback son. Just I hope that'd be the case. But it is tough when you got kids on both sides, right? We haven't talked probably enough about that.
Yeah, Jake actually took a question. You know, one of the last questions he took after the Missouri game was someone asked him about that situation. Well, the difference here is Tyler Fromm is going to redshirting this year at Auburn. He's a tight end. Really great looking prospect. He's actually already an accomplished pilot. That's what he's done a lot is he's gotten his pilot's license already through a program at Auburn. The other brother we got to remember is also playing at Mercer right now. Dylan is also a redshirt freshman at Mercer as well. And I think Jake is kind of center stage, and this will be a good time for the family to all to get together and tailgate and see everybody at the game. Of course, it will be nice to, that photo after the game of the Fromm brothers there together on the same college football field. That'll be a lasting memento. But to me, not a huge story because Tyler Fromm doesn't play defense, and he's actually not a crucial member of the Auburn game plan yet.
Jarvis Hanna says, what about Justin Flo? Any update on the 5-star linebacker?
Justin Flo, he's expected to take his official visit to Georgia for the Texas A&M game. Him and C.J. Stroud are actually boys a little bit. If you notice, consider me to be one of the most surprised people in the recruiting industry if Justin Flo ever ends up with Georgia, because I've never put him on the top targets list or even the Clark County phone book of honorable mentions during our top targets list.
Rodney Mabry asking about Zachary Evans. Anything new on Evans?
LSU's getting a lot of crystal balls for him. That seems like that's the school du jour or school of the week or school of the month there for Zachary Evans. Got to wonder about that fit there because, number one, I told you earlier, LSU currently has 9 defensive line commitments, 1 offensive line commitments, and he would be going to a more crowded backfield than a lot of other places on his pecking order, like a Texas A&M, like a Alabama, or even like a Georgia. But Ty Davis is now your second-string running back at LSU, and John Emery Jr., remember that name, Dog Nation? He's there as well.
Elite GB says, out of the 2020 class, who is BA and Jeff's most sought-after recruits top 3? Well, Jeff's already given you his. He's got Ringo 1, Sewell close behind, and third on that list he's got Jordan Birch. And yeah, for now I'm actually kind of fine with that list. And initially mine was probably a little bit different, but for the most part, Jeff's kind of won me over with the 3 guys that he's had on the top targets list for a while.
Now, I'm not trying to speak out of both sides of my program here, or both sides of the Before the Hedges program, but he has said differently. I think because remember that top targets is a mixture of mutual interest, need, other factors. Ability of the recruit. But if I had to sit there and you said, Jeff, who are the 3 best remaining guys that Georgia would close with? My answer would be different from the top targets. It would go Keeley Ringo, Noah Sewell, and the third would be Theo Johnson. I think Theo, with what Georgia needs at the tight end position, and I've said all along on this program, I think Theo, in my mind's eye, will maximize his potential and be the best professional prospect coming out of college. And I'll, come back and talk to me about it 3 or 4 years down the road. But I think Theo Johnson would be the cure to all the tight end questions if he ended up choosing the University of Georgia.
So I have a certain obligation not to run with unsubstantiated rumors, so I can't mention this one out loud. But have you ever even heard this one before? Have you ever even heard that rumor before? That's pretty funny. One of these days you'll have to sit me down, Sands, and tell me what you know about that, because that's a pretty fun story. But we can't obviously run with that here right now. But nonetheless, appreciate you being here on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger today. Obviously, Georgia getting ready for a big push towards not just Saturday in Auburn, but as I said, to start our program today, a big push for the closeout of that 2020 class there as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We certainly appreciate Kroger allowing us to talk some recruiting here each and every Wednesday. And, of course, also getting you ready for the holiday season. Get your order there in by November 25th to be ready to go for Thanksgiving dinner, or take advantage of the free pickup there when you order online and get ready to go pick up there in store. Giving you time back, giving you a chance to really enjoy this holiday season. Make sure you check out Kroger for more on that. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily. Hope you all have a great afternoon, and we'll look forward to speaking to you then.